Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice! Definitely one of the most standout Tim Burton movies around, as it just emanates this odd energy. A movie where, honestly, it's kind of hard to tell who's the actual lead of the movie. I mean, a lot of us like to say that it's Beetlejuice, of course, it's what he's named after, but he doesn't really show up till about halfway through the movie. Would it be the Mitlands? I mean, come on, how can you push Alec Baldwin into a supporting role? It begins with them, and to a certain degree, it kind of ends with them for the most part, and yet, despite the fact that we see the movie from their point of view, and they end up, to a certain degree, kind of being the ones who unleash Beetlejuice upon the situation, they kind of become auxiliary characters in what should essentially be their own story. Or is it Lydia Dietz? I mean, Winona Ryder influenced a generation to a certain degree. Like, when you talk goth icons, Lydia Dietz, come on. I remember when I was a child and I would watch this movie, I always found myself kind of only ever remembering the second half of the movie. Once the Dietz and Beetlejuice came into play with each other. That isn't to say that I didn't enjoy Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis's characters. It's just that once Beetlejuice entered into the fray, things took on this whole new life. It was fun, it was wacky, it was wild, it was weird, but I always remember thinking it was so much wilder than it actually was, that so much more happened than what actually happened. Not to mention the weird, horrific relationship that Beetlejuice tried to enter into with Lydia. Like, ooh, creeper alert, but that's what Beetlejuice was, a creeper. He was a freak, he was a weirdo. He was trying to cause havoc and mayhem and do all these terrible things. He preyed upon the Mitlands and their newly deceased status, or deceased in a manner of perspective, more or less, but Beetlejuice was never portrayed as anything less than a terrible person and a horrible entity that even the afterlife considered someone dangerous. And yet he really did steal the movie, but at the same time, can you really say he stole a movie with his name plastered on it? Although, considering that the actual spelling of his name doesn't match the way that it's depicted or even pronounced to a certain degree, it's just like, can you even really say that it's about him? There are just so many odd points of analysis for this movie in general, and the more you watch it, the more questions arise, or the more things you notice, especially when it comes to the afterlife and all that stuff. And honestly, what was originally just something fun to look at because of all the wild character designs and props and stop motion animations that this movie did, the older I got, the more I started to realize the kind of odd and intricate nuances of this movie. The little comedic moments, or the little adult humor for, like, I guess parents, but considering the nature of this movie wasn't even something you should even be showing to kids. I mean, this movie came out before I was even born, and yet I just remember it being replayed on television so much and so often, and just constantly being just so enraptured by the wild antics of the most disturbing, vengeful spirit you've ever seen this side of The Exorcist. This movie was a success in ways that, honestly, it's hard to even think of it being a success. And like most movies that definitely were not for kids, it ended up with a animated spin-off. Now, the animated series Beetlejuice, oh, I remember vividly. But it was always so hard to kind of think of it as a spin-off of the movie because the relationship that Beetlejuice had with Lydia, the Dietzes, and the living world in general was vastly different. In the animated series, Beetlejuice and Lydia were friends, best friends almost. You could almost think that maybe Beetlejuice kind of had a weird thing for her. It's hard to say in a lot of cases. But that was never the case in the movie. Hell, Lydia had no reason to even like Beetlejuice or even had any real association with Beetlejuice aside from that moment where he wanted to marry her. Honestly, the animated series almost feels like fan fiction to a certain degree because it takes the idea of the movie and takes it in a completely different direction. The Mitlands become non-entities in terms of the animated series, and their role of being a friend and ally to Lydia is completely usurped by Beetlejuice. Honestly, you could almost see the series as a what if Lydia kind of took Beetlejuice up on his offer of kind of getting together, more or less. Or even, what if Beetlejuice had met Lydia by happen chance instead of the Mitlands? It's such a wild direction to take things. And honestly, Beetlejuice himself goes from this devilish entity that you would make a Faustian bargain with to basically being magical Eddie from Ed, Edd and Eddy, constantly trying to scam the residents of the Netherworld. And that really becomes the selling point of the series, the Netherworld, and all the weird, wacky, and wild inhabitants therein. However, instead of it being a world of the deceased, the Netherworld is treated more as though it's just this magical other land with weird and wacky characters like Jacques Laline, a skeleton bodybuilder, Ginger the tap dancing spider, which that name pretty much says it all. The monster across the street basically make Gossamer from the Looney Tunes a Texan, and Beetlejuice's sentient car Doomy. It's just a who's who of wacky and honestly Tim Burton-esque characters, where the world of the living is a lot more bland, and this other world is a lot more lively, wacky, and wild. And Beetlejuice spends his days trying to scam the residents of the Netherworld as Lydia plays the voice of reason to all of Beetlejuice's terrible and underhanded antics. I remember watching the television series and just having a lot of fun with it for the most part. Not the best series around, but it was highly entertaining because you were always wondering what kind of trouble would Beetlejuice get into this time and how would Lydia manage to bail him out of his bad choices. It's just such a shift from the movie, but that's what a lot of 80s movies had, from RoboCop to Back to the Future, movies that really should not have been adapted into children's content, constantly being adapted into children's content, and being honestly kind of beloved to a certain degree by children. Just such a weird practice, but at the same time it worked. It was fun, it was funky, it was wild, and it just permeated my mind. Cause Lydia from the movie was fun. Lydia from the animated series was a crush of mine. Like, I loved Lydia in the animated series. From her style to her personality. Yes, she was goth, but she had this almost peppiness about her to a certain degree. She was kind of a realist, the embodiment of a lot of characters we would see and continue to see decades later. From Sam and Danny Phantom to Gwen on Total Drama Island. A lot of goth archetypes really kind of radiated out of Lydia. And to say that she might have even inspired generations afterwards, I don't feel is an understatement, or overstatement I should say. Now, I keep hearing that they're continuously trying to revive the movie series, and to no avail, and I think Beetlejuice is just one of those things that had this bright, glorious moment in the sun. It had its time and then it shuffled off this mortal coil. And honestly, I think that might just be for the best. Beetlejuice was better than it had any right to be. It came in like a wrecking ball and slipped away into the night, in its sleep peacefully. Creepy in all the right ways and fun beyond all reason, Beetlejuice will always be one of the starting parts for the gothic movement, and I always welcome it wholeheartedly. But what are your memories of Beetlejuice? Did you watch the movie first or the animated series? Were you influenced by it in any way? Did you grow up with it, or did you end up watching it years later down the line? I'm interested to hear from you, and if you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more of my 2D memories. Or don't. I ain't your daddy, but I still love you like one. And until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.